There. We are now recording this session. I think we have one more person is getting in. Oh, Walter. Oh, good. Looking summary there. And somebody else. Claire. Hi, Claire. Good to see you all. Okay. Well, welcome, welcome. This is going to be our MCQ meetup, talking about the Unit 5 MCQs, which everyone except for 3 people had a chance to do. And as when I last checked. And so we'll get started here, but we are going to start first. So here's Abigail. Thank you. You're here. You're not looking sleepy, are you? It's early in the morning for you, right?
Yeah, luckily, daylight saving time ends, so it's a little bit later than usual.
Oh, good, 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 good. That's nice. So you do have daylight savings time there. Does China still have just one time zone?
Yeah, we still have one time zone, so for the current ET time zone, it's like 1 hour back. So
Mhm.
8 p.m. ET will be our 9 a.m. instead of 8 a.m.
Oh, good, good. Great. Hi, Noel. Okay, now we're really getting started. We have been recording this, but we'll get started. And before we get into our MCQ meetup, I want to talk for just a few minutes about contextualization, because I want to see if everybody can strongly get that point this time for this week with your LEQs coming up. And I thought of an image that might help you. What a lot of you, I said this in my update, I don't know if you saw it. Um, a lot of students tend to do what I'm going to call a movie trailer. There's sort of, you know how you've all seen movie trailers, those little 3-minute things about a 2-hour movie, and they take little scenes from the movie and they kind of, connect them together to give you a feel for what's coming in the movie. Okay, it's a movie trailer. And a lot of you are doing that in your opening, what you're hoping is going to get you that contextualization point. And I don't think that won't do it because you're going to tell about those things pretty soon. Don't do that. What instead you should think of is, you know how in movies you might have a series of, you might have a movie and then suddenly there's a prequel, a movie that tells sort of the backstory, what came before this. And can anyone give an example? I'm not up on modern movies. Kaylee, what's an example of a movie with a prequel?
Star Wars.
Yeah, then they had prequels, right? And they had a lot of, subsequent ones too, but they also had prequels. I think it would be really useful to think, maybe for this essay coming up. I know a couple of you have already done it, but try to think in terms of writing a prequel, okay? Something that will kind of, by what you're saying there, is going to explain or set the scene, help people understand what's coming up. But don't give us a movie trailer. Don't tell us in a brief little quickie 3 sentences what you're going to tell us in your coming 3 paragraphs, okay? Think in terms of a prequel, not a movie trailer, okay? And I want to show, and it can be either just a little bit before, like say, I'm going to give you a couple of examples here from the DBQs, because that's what I last graded, finally. Um, and you could go just a little bit before the documents, the time before, or you could even go up to 50 years or more before. But you're setting the scene, you're giving a prequel, okay? Like think of Star Wars, the prequel, okay? So let me share my screen. I'm going to show you, this is an essay by Joanna Wang, okay? She was doing that Era of Good Feelings essay topic. Hold up, let me share this. Okay. You can all see my screen? Yeah. You can see okay. Let me get you all set up again. Okay. So her part in red is her contextual, what she's hoping to get the contextualization point. So all those documents in that arrow good feelings started after the War of 1812. Okay. They didn't say anything about the War of 1812. They started afterwards. Okay. So what she did was she went back just a little bit, a little prequel. And she says the War of 1812 was a result of disagreements between the US and Britain, consisting of trade disputes, as Britain imposed trade restrictions, and the Americans blamed the British for the resistance of the Indians as they moved westward. The war gave the Americans a sense of national pride and independence, but also led to the decline of the Federalist Party. Many historians labeled the period after this war the era of good feelings, suggesting it was a time of national harmony and unity. Okay, and then she leads right into the bold-faced black, into her thesis. Okay, so you see she gave a little bit of a prequel. She told a little bit about what was happening before 1815. Okay, and let me show you one more. This one is Naomi's. Hold up. Okay. So she was doing the one about why did opposition to slavery grow from 1776 to 1852. So she went way back. Okay. And here's how she opens. Crops were thriving, money was being made, slaves were getting beaten. That's kind of a nice triplet there, isn't it? With a twist at the end. Ever since the introduction of slavery to the Americas, close to the very start of the colonies, slaves have been a big and crucial part to American society and economy. They were the ones who worked all day in the hot sun, harvesting tobacco, rice, or cotton. And then she moves into her thesis of why opposition began. So she went way back, really back to the early colonial times. A little bit general, but nice. Do you see that's a nice prequel? Okay. I think that's all I'm going to share about that, and we can get right into since I'm on here, let me go right over. So you all promise me you're not going to do a movie trailer. That's the phrase I'm going to use. Okay. So I went through the MCQs and I saw which ones seemed to be particularly tricky questions. And those are the ones we're going to go over. And for this one, number one, almost everyone got. So we're not going to go over that. But let's just review this. Can I have a reader who can read this with a good twang? Okay. Bishop, let's hear you. Do you want it a little bigger? Let me see. I can make this bigger.
Do you really want the twang?
Yeah, I mean, this is they're out there in California.
All right then. No roads marked the way to the traveler in California then, but guided by the sun and well-known mountain peaks, we proceeded on our journey. Some 40 or 50 men were at work with the cradle machines and were averaging about 8 ounces of gold per day to the man. But a few moments passed before I was knee-deep in water with my wash basin full of dirt, plunging it about, endeavoring to separate the dirt from the gold. After washing some 50 pans of dirt, I found I had realized about 4 bits worth of gold. Reader, do you know how one feels when the gold fever heat has suddenly fallen to about 0? I do. The Indians who were working for Captains Sutter and Weber gave them leading information so that they were enabled to know the direction in which new discoveries were to be made. The morals of the miners of 48 should here be noticed. No person worked on Sunday at digging gold. We had ministers of the gospel among us, but they never preached. Religion had been forgotten even by its ministers, and instead of their pointing out the narrow way which leads to eternal happiness, they might be seen with a pickaxe and pan, traveling untraveled ways in search of treasure, or drinking good health and prosperity with friends.
Very
Oh my
good.
goodness. I'm not sure if my accent migrated
It
a
was
bit there, but
it was great. Let's hear it for Bishop. Great accent. That was good. It was fun to listen to. I actually found you can find this. It's like a little book, like a maybe 40-page book, like a pamphlet about his time in the gold fields. But you can find it online. I always like to do that with these things. I'm not requiring you guys to do that, but it's fun to do. You might choose every time we have one of these sets, you might choose one, kind of like a DBQ Woo, and look up more about it. And the poor guy died in 1853, and the book was published just the year before. Okay, so question one was not problematical. Everyone got that. With the acquisition of significant territory following the Mexican-American War, which, what is that year? 1848 when he's writing that? The year that the Mexican-American War ended. So there we go. But number two gave some people trouble. Not everyone, but gave some people trouble. So let's go over this. Which of the following developments resulted most directly from the gold rush described in the excerpt? So we want to see a direct connection. A, an anti-Catholic movement arose in Western mining communities. B, plantation agriculture spread from the south to the Pacific coast. C, people from America, Europe, and Asia migrated to the region. D, the West Coast became a major industrial center for the U.S. Who's got, everyone says, yeah, I forgot to tell you to do ups and downs. So what's the best one here and why? Why could you figure it's not some of the others? Oh, Jacob, good to see you. Who thinks they got the answer? Bishop.
I'm calling it as C because A, I know that actually happened, and B, it would make sense for people to migrate there once they figured out there was gold.
Right,
Basically happens in every gold rush, it's a lot of migration.
right.
Um,
Yeah, everyone wanted to come in. Again, people from all over.
uh,
People from China,
I,
people from Europe, all over
I had
America.
an additional question,
Yep,
ma'am.
yep.
When we do our MCQ sets, are we
Mhm.
allowed to count the snippets as primary
As
source documents?
yes, 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 definitely,
Thank you. Thank
definitely.
you. That's what I wanted to know.
And yep, that would be great. And they're always interesting, and it's fun too to look up something about them to find like, oh gosh, this really is a document. Um, but yeah, the anti-Catholic movement arose in Western mining communities. There were a lot of Irish who went out to, find gold. So uh, I don't think there was too much of an anti-Catholic movement because they were kind of, I mean, just a fairly short time later, they were kind of, the mayor of San Francisco or something. The Irish were in kind of leadership positions. So I don't think there was much of an anti-Catholic movement out there. They were all busy getting gold, even the ministers. Okay, let's look at number three. Okay. The excerpt best reflects the development of which of the following? The emergence of an abolitionist movement in the Western territories. What do you think? Yay, nay? Yeah, right. Certainly they didn't say anything about that in the excerpt. The widely held belief that the U.S. had a right to expand westward. We got a lot of yeses for that one. Yeah, that makes sense, doesn't it? They are expanding west. But let's look at all of them. the increasing importance of cotton exports to the U.S. economy. It's not reflecting that. And again, that other one that thought that plantation agriculture was spreading from the South to the Pacific, that wasn't true. There was no cotton grown in California, and I don't think cotton was ever grown in California. And slavery was soon not to be allowed there. Oh, and the last one, the debates about Native Americans and Mexican nationals dispossessed of land in California. Does it reflect that? That was an issue, but this excerpt doesn't, they're not concerned about that. Okay, so good. But a few people thought that was confusing. I think maybe people went for D. I can't remember which one, but let's go on to the next one. Okay. Oh, this one was tricky. I want us to look at these. So this is one of these ones, we've got two excerpts by two different people. That one continues. So what are we looking at? Are we looking at primary documents or secondary documents here? Secondary, yeah, secondary. And APUSH teachers often call these dueling historians. Like they probably have some different views. Oh, hi, Madeline. They probably have different views in some ways, and they're going to try to see if you can tell that. So let's see. How about we have someone read the first excerpt, Amy Greenberg, a woman historian, and then we'll get someone else to do Thomas Haitala. Okay. Walter, do you want to do the first one?
Sure.
Yeah.
It was not automatically apparent how any of the filibustering targets of the post-1848 period could fit into American Republic, or even into an American empire. While it seemed only logical to some to simply take all of Mexico as booty, spoils of the war, cut Mexico up and turn it into new territories and states, most Americans rejected this idea. They did so because central Mexico was densely populated. Many Americans feared the result of the integration of Mexico's people into the United States. Critics also doubted whether Americans could be happy in the alien landscape of central and southern Mexico.
Very good. Very good. Yeah. So anyone know what that term filibustering here means? Have you ever heard that? You might have heard about filibusters in Congress, but this is a second meaning. Let me hear Jacob. He's got an idea on that. And then we'll get Walter. Jacob, do you want to share what filibustering might mean here?
Well, I know specifically in Congress, filibuster is like when you debate for a really long period of time in order to kind of wait for the time to run out before,
Mm-hmm.
a bill to get passed. And
Yeah.
I guess in this situation, it might be, um, is probably, yeah, it's probably about the same thing. They're trying to stop some things from being passed that wouldn't benefit them, I'm guessing.
That's a very good guess. It's not true. And this is, someone should maybe look up, like, why did filibuster get these two really completely different meanings? Let's hear from Bishop. He's getting antsy here. Yeah, Bishop.
All right, so if I'm correct, there's that congressional kind of filibuster, and then there's also the filibuster of scouting out other nations' territory to see whether you can take it over.
Right, right,
Aaron Burr tried to filibuster with Florida. He got in some trouble because of it.
right, right. And yeah, and I don't know what the meaning of the words are from the history of the words, how they got such very different meanings. But filibustering was really a big thing in this before the Civil War time period of going in. There were these guys who were really planning and scheming, and a couple of them who did go into like Nicaragua and Cuba and things like this, and they wanted to take them over and have them be new U.S. territories or states. And some of those stories are very funny. Our TA Sebastian Weinkauf did his National History Day research last year about one of these filibustering groups that was wanting to go into, Mexico and things like that and take it over. And so that was a known term. That was what the term meant. Maybe it's historical. Maybe that's what it meant in those days. And then later it got this congressional meaning. I don't know. But anyway, that's what they're referring to. And then here they're talking about the Mexican-American War and the aftermath. Okay, now for our second historian, who wants to impersonate the second historian? Kaylee. Okay.
American settlers had eclipsed the Mexicans in Texas and, with ample aid from Southern whites, had rebelled and won their independence. A small band of Americans, many of them merchants, lived in Mexican California when war broke out in 1846. This dispersion of hardy migrants inspired observers to insist that pioneers and not politicians won the West. Pioneers played a role in expansion, but the historical record points to politicians and propagandists as the primary agents of empire. Racial, economic, social, and political factors
Coalesced.
combined to make territorial and commercial expansion enticing to American leaders. Denying any parallels between earlier empires and their own, expansionists insisted that democracy and dominion were complementary, not contradictory. Since leaders intended to transform territorial cessions into states, and their inhabitants, at least whites, into citizens, they scoffed at misgivings about governing a vast domain.
Very good. Thank you. Okay. So we've got these two historians talking about expansion in the West. And let's see. So the first one, we've got a question. They want to see, how do these two both probably agree a little bit? Which of the following arguments about the Mexican-American War do the excerpts best support? So both of them together, okay? So give us an up or down. A, it resulted in the first efforts at Western expansion. I'm seeing a lot of downs, but that was the most popular wrong answer. A lot of people said that. Why would that be wrong? Why would that one be wrong? What's a key word there that would show it to be wrong? Walter.
First, saying it's the first attempt at westward expansion. Of course, there was like lots of attempts at westward expansion before, so that's
Yes.
clearly wrong.
We've been moving west since we first got here, right? And or just even if you want to, Louisiana and territory and all that. So yeah, it wasn't the first effort at Western expansion. Oh yeah, and the one, it ended sectional tensions between the North and South. Well, that's what is like, bip, absolutely wrong. And it contributed to the elimination of the domestic slave trade. No, the only thing that eliminated the domestic slave trade was the end of the Civil War. But it did generate debates about citizenship, over citizenship. Like, would these new people, if we bring them in, would they be citizens? And that's, you all probably haven't gotten there yet in your reading or even the Heimler videos, but by the end of the 19th century, when we start, not just, we've gone ocean to ocean in the US, and now it's like, oh, what about Hawaii? What about Alaska? What about all these other places, that we could expand to, or we're going to gain the Philippines during the Spanish-American War at the end of the century. And there it was really debated about, well, are these people like in the Philippines? Are they going to be US citizens? Are they going to be a state? No, that couldn't be. That was most people's reaction. Of course not. And they never even tried that. And then, eventually the Philippines got to be their own country again. But that debates about citizenship is an important issue. Okay. So how about this one? Greenberg's argument most differs from Hayatala's in that Greenberg claims, so that was the woman, the first person. Greenberg claims that A, race was a defining factor in the tensions leading up to the Mexican-American War. Do you think on that? Yeah. Rainbow says no. I agree. Yeah, no. But this was a confusing one for people. Pioneers, not politicians, were a major factor in building the American empire. That one's a little tricky because she talks about that issue, but she says, well, a lot of people say this, but, so she says, but it's not really true. C, most Americans believe that Mexicans in the new territories could not assimilate. By that, they kind of get back to that citizenship idea. They'd be so different. What do you think there? Yeah, Kaylee says yes. Madeline says yes. Yeah, that would be I mean, they don't talk about assimilation, but they do say about, whoa, it's so densely populated. There's so many people didn't know how these Mexicans would, what did she say? Right. They feared the results of integration of Mexico's people into the United States. So that would, so to say, they'll always be different. They won't be able to integrate in. Okay. So that was a little tricky one. Oh, here, one more choice. D, the granting of citizenship to people in the territories was welcomed by many Americans after the war. No, they never did that. Okay, so that was a little bit tricky. And this one too was a little bit hard. Both authors would most likely suggest, so again, you're going to have to sort of guess here based on what they've said, what they might also say. Both authors would most likely suggest that the historical situation described in the excerpts contributed to which of the following? A, the continued alteration of Native American culture and society. This might be something they don't discuss in either excerpt, but they probably would agree with that. I see a few yeses, a few like, let's go on. B, the failure of Reconstruction policies to enforce constitutional amendments. Do we have any indication of what the authors would feel about that? No, it's just so unrelated. C, the debate over the rights of states to nullify federal laws. It's so unrelated, we can't make a guess over what this. The controversy over the Supreme Court decision in Dred Scott versus Sanford. You all know what that decision is, right? But they're not talking about anything related to that, so I think it's A. Okay, that was a little bit tricky. Okay. Oh, this next one is very interesting. It's an interesting excerpt. So first of all, what are we looking at here? What's this excerpt? Rainbow for a primary document, right? Yeah.
Primary.
Yeah. How many people had heard of John C. Calhoun? That name rings a bell? Good. Yes, he's an important guy. And and what's the year? 1847. Give me something that was happening around that time. Just general. Bishop.
The Mexican-American War was going on.
Is that what you were going to say, Walter? Yep. That was it, the Mexican-American War, which is causing tensions. Okay, so let's see what he says. When he says Mr. President, by the way, do you think he's talking about the President of the U.S.? He's a senator giving a speech in the U.S. Senate. Anyone know who the President of the Senate is? Madeline.
Is it like the vice president or something?
Yeah, it's the vice president is considered the president of the Senate. So a lot of times in these Senate speeches, they'll say, Mr. President, but it's not the president who's there, it's the vice president. Okay. So who wants to be Calhoun? He's from the South. Rainbow. Okay.
Mr. President, it was solemnly asserted on this floor some time ago that all parties in the non-slaveholding states had come to a fixed and solemn determination upon two propositions. One was that there should be no further admission of any states into this union which permitted by their constitutions the existence of slavery, and the other was that slavery shall not hereafter exist in any of the territories of the United States, the effect of which would be to give to the non-slaveholding states the monopoly of the public domain. The subject has been agitated in the other House of Congress, and they have sent up a bill prohibiting the extension of slavery to any territory which may be acquired by the United States hereafter. At the same time, two resolutions which have been moved to extend the compromised line from the Rocky Mountains to the Pacific during the present session have been rejected by a decided majority. Sir, there is no mistaking the signs of the times, and it is high time that the southern states, the slave-holding states, should inquire what is now their relative strength in this union, and what it will be if this determination is carried into effect hereafter.
Excellent. Very good. Okay. Does anyone recognize what Calhoun is referring to? They sent up a bill prohibiting the extension of slavery to any territory which may be acquired by the U.S. hereafter. Anyone think of, we've had, I don't know where we had something, but it was one of the documents in the DBQs from Unit 5 had a little excerpt from this. Aubrey, do you want to give it a go?
I can't remember what bill exactly it was, but wasn't this what the Free Soilers were
Yes,
advocating?
this was what the Free Soilers, and remember the Wilmot Proviso? The Wilmot Proviso, David Wilmot, I think was his name. And it's kind of interesting to me that gets known, and it's in all the history books. You're supposed to know what the Wilmot Proviso was, and it's something that never passed. You know, usually if things don't pass, they get rejected by Congress, we don't remember them. Okay, that was just something in the rough drafts of, congressional history, and we don't think about it because it didn't pass. But this one is known. It's in every APUSH textbook. The Wilmot Proviso, and again, one of our DBQ documents from Unit 5 had David Wilmot's speech about it. And yeah, he was a free soiler. So here Calhoun is reacting to that. So it was basically saying any territories we gain from this Mexican-American war, no slavery should be allowed. And what's that line about? At the same time, two resolutions which have been moved to extend the compromise line from the Rocky Mountains to the Pacific. What's the compromise line? What's that? You have a guess? Kaylee?
The Missouri Compromise Line.
Yeah, the Missouri, well, that'll solve the problem. We'll just go all the way west. Because the Missouri Compromise Line was only about the Louisiana Territory, that big, huge area. But we didn't own anything, there's no reason to have extended it farther west because we didn't own that. Be like, I don't know what would be analogous, but yeah. But now they're saying, well, now we do own that, or we're about to own that, so let's just extend that line. That worked. Let's extend it. And that was apparently voted down too. Okay, so let's go on to the questions here. And I'll tell you which was the most popular wrong answer to. Okay, the excerpt best provides evidence about which of the following historical situations in the late 1840s. A, increased conflict between urban immigrants and nativists. Kaylee says, no, yeah, it's not about that. Oh, Anna, you're here. Good to see you.
Sorry, I thought is it the update Var said the sixth, and I was like,
Uh,
oh my gosh, what? I thought we moved it because of the holidays. So I was like,
yeah,
okay.
yeah, right. Sorry. We knew something must have gone wrong. We all missed you. Okay. Um, so we're on just, hang in here, listen. So B, compromises between the Supreme Court and national leaders. Does it give us any insight into that? Rainbow says no, and I agree. Yeah, it doesn't, this is not talking about that. C, the expanding influence of the Northern abolitionist movement. Kaylee says, no, but that sounds almost tempting. This one was the most popular wrong answer. And that might be one where you'd get to it and it sounds pretty good, and you go for it and you don't even read the last answer. So always remember to read every answer. There might be a better one. Because really, as somebody who was at Aubrey, who said that this Wilmot Proviso was really a free soiler thing, which really, how would free soiler views be different from abolitionists? Anyone have a sense about that? Kaylee?
Were the Free Soilers ones that just wanted to not have slavery extended anywhere but didn't want to abolish it where it already was?
Yeah, exactly. That's a really good way of putting it. Do you have something else to add, Sana?
I would also say that free soilers mostly were doing it just for their own um betterment, like for their own reason. And
Yeah,
abolitionists actually cared about slaves.
that's a great way of putting it. Yeah, like they were saying, "Hey, we're white people. We want free whites to be able to settle here, not be affected by slaves around them." Right, right. That's a very good way of putting it. Okay, but that was the most common wrong answer. And again, I think probably kids who got that wrong, it sounds like a conflict between slavery and not slavery. So they went for that and they didn't read the last one. So let's look at the last one. It says growing sectional tensions caused by the Mexican-American War. Walter says, yes, I agree. Yeah, that's the one. It's kind of very general. It's like, oh yeah, those sectional conflicts. But that's the one. Growing tensions. Okay. Let's look at the next one. This is about the same documents. The speech given by Calhoun relates to which of the following? So we want to see a direct connection. A, the effect of regional attitudes on federal policymaking. We went, oh, Abigail says, yeah, it sounds pretty good. Sona says so too. The rest of you aren't sure. Some people are yawning. Let's see, let's read the rest. We never want to make a decision just based on the first one. B, the ways in which immigration changed American culture. It's really not about immigration at all. That one's pretty easy to zap out. C, the efforts by national leaders to expand the Pacific trade. No, it ain't about that. Okay, and D, the widespread support for the immediate end of slavery. Was that widespread at this time, late 1840s? No. Even Lincoln, if he were asked, he wouldn't say he was for that. Okay, very good. Okay, the next one was most people got that one, so we're not going to do it. Let's see. Okay, now we have this Frederick Douglass letter. Maybe published in the newspaper, I don't know. But he sent it to the editor. Anyone recognize this name of who he was writing to? Horace Greeley? I do, because you know what the name of my high school was that I went to? I went to Horace Greeley High School. So everyone in my town knew about Horace Greeley. I used to work, I've told some of you kids this, I used to work at the Horace Greeley gift shop in my town. He was not alive, but this was his house, his like weekend or vacation, summer vacation house in my town. And so my town had a lot about him. Everything was named after Horace Greeley. Okay, so and he's this big New York newspaper editor. Walter, you've got something to say, or are you just frozen with your hand up?
Oh yeah, I was gonna say about Horace Greeley. He was abolitionist, but he's really against Lincoln. Published a lot of like satire cartoons of him. And
Mhm.
then one interesting thing on him is that after the Civil War, he bailed Jefferson Davis out of jail.
He did. He did. He bailed. He paid the money to get Jefferson Davis out of federal prison. Right. And many of those Southern leaders, those what do you think if you were like a Southern leader like Jefferson Davis or Robert E. Lee, what would you think might happen to you if your side lost? What would the North do to you? What would you worry about? Walter.
Being hanged or putting before a firing squad. Like I worry about capital punishment,
Yeah,
but that's not what Lincoln intended, and not even really what Johnson intended.
yeah,
Uh,
they didn't.
a few Confederates were put to death, like the guy who commanded the Andersonville
Right, the
prison
big
camp. He
horrible
got
prison, right? He got killed.
Henry
And
something. I only remember the Henry because my brother's named Henry, and he didn't like hearing about that. But
likes all the
not
Henrys.
too many Confederates were put to death.
No, really not. I mean, John Wilkes Booth, who shot Lincoln, well, he was killed, but the conspirators were hung, but nobody else. And people didn't know that. Like a lot of Confederate high ups fled the country. They were kind of like, I don't know if you're all following the news in Iran and Venezuela, but the former leader of Iran is about to flee to Russia right now, because he knows if he stays there, his people are going to kill him or put him on trial and then execute him. Uh, so yeah, that's a common thing to worry about if you've been a leader that's now lost. But they didn't do that. But yeah, Horace Greeley came in for a lot of grief from people for doing that, bailing out Jefferson Davis. They thought that wasn't right. Um, but yeah, so Frederick Douglass is writing to Horace Greeley in 1846. So this is it before or after the Fugitive Slave Act, the new one? Abigail.
I think that would be before because it's like passed at the same time as the Compromise of 1850. So, and
Yes,
it is still 1846.
right. I didn't use the 18 Compromise of 1850 name because I didn't want to give it away. But yeah, so it's a little bit before that, but Frederick Douglass he's probably already published his autobiography, his narrative. And now he's writing to Horace Greeley. Okay. Um, so can somebody read Frederick Douglass here? How about Jacob? Can you read that? Wait, Jacob's I maybe frozen up here.
Hmm? Uh,
Yeah,
from starting from the top, right?
yeah.
I know not how to thank you for the deep and lively interest you have been pleased to take in the cause of the emancipation of the people, who for too long centuries have endured with the utmost patience a bondage, 1 hour of which is worse than ages of that which your fathers rose in rebellion to oppose. It is such conditions on the part of the press, which happily are multiplying throughout all the land, that kindle up within me an ardent hope that the curse of slavery will not much longer be permitted to make its iron footprints in the lacerated cut hearts of my brethren. I am called by way of reports a runaway slave, as if it were a crime, an unpardonable crime for a man to take his inalienable rights. But why a New York editor, born and reared in the state of Maine, far removed from the contaminated atmosphere of slavery, should pursue a course supporting abolition is not so apparent. I will not, however, stop here to ascertain the cause, but deal with the fact. The object is simply to give an exposition of the degrading influence of slavery upon the master and his supporters, as well as upon the slave, to excite such an intelligent interest on the subject of American slavery as may react upon that country and tend to shame her out of her adhesion to a system which all must confess to disagree with justice. I am earnestly and anxiously laboring to wipe off this foul blot from the American people, that they may accomplish in behalf of human freedom that which their exalted position among the nations of the earth amply fits them to do.
Excellent. Bravo. Well done. And so, yeah, does anyone sort of catch some allusions to Declaration of Independence type language here? Or Revolutionary War time? He's going back to that. Bishop, what'd you notice?
Well, I noticed, um, what, is there an edit tool? No, there's, oh, there's not an edit tool.
Yeah.
I noticed the bit up top where it talks about your fathers rose in rebellion. Um,
Remember
I see.
all those times when the patriotic language of why we're rebelling is the king is enslaving us. You know, he's alluding to that, like, you hypocrites. You know, we've been enduring for 2 centuries. Would an hour of slavery be worse than what you endured? You know, all
I
those
also
years,
see.
the
I also see
inalienable
this.
right? Or
Mhm.
let's hear Jonathan here.
Yeah,
John,
I was gonna say that he uses some similar language to the Enlightenment sort of language that the founding fathers used.
yes.
The inalienable rights
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
was what I would.
Yes. Very good. Very good. Yes. So that's kind of an interesting thing that Douglas is doing here. And he's surprised that, you know, yeah, Horace Greeley was raised very poor in the state of Maine. So he never had any experience with slavery, but he was really um, a strong abolitionist. He was quite a supporter of the idea of abolition. Anyone know what he wrote to Lincoln during the Civil War or published in his newspaper? Anyone know about? It's pretty famous. He published this letter in his newspaper called like the prayer for 10 million or something like that, and or 50 million, I don't know. And he was calling on Lincoln to abolish slavery in the middle of the Civil War. And he did this publicly in his newspaper. You know, like, why aren't you moving on this? You should be pushing for abolition. And so Lincoln felt he had to respond in writing to Horace Greeley. And what he did, he sent a letter to another rival newspaper and they printed it, but it was an answer to Horace Greeley. And he said there very famously, and people always misinterpret what he said. He said, "What I do about slavery, I do to save the Union. If I could save the Union by freeing all the slaves, I would do so. If I could free save the Union by freeing some of the slaves and leaving some still enslaved, I would do that. He's laying this out. And what nobody knew at the time, this was like in the summer of 1862, nobody knew something that Abe Lincoln already had like in a drawer in his desk. He'd already written something. What do you think he had written? Suna, what's your guess?
The Emancipation Proclamation.
He had written the Emancipation Proclamation. He'd even shared it with his cabinet members, and they all said, well, they kind of grudgingly said, well, this is nice, but don't do it now because we're losing the war and this will make us just look desperate. You can't free the slaves if we don't have any power. So it just make us look silly. So you have to wait. So he was waiting, but he had the Emancipation Proclamation. Horace Greeley had no idea about this when he writes this, but and Lincoln was kind of preparing people because what he did in the Emancipation Proclamation, did he free all the slaves? Or did he free some of the slaves? Did he free none of them? What did it do? Let's get Suna and then Kaylee.
It
Suna.
freed the slaves in the Confederate area.
Yeah, in the slaves in the Confederate areas that were still in rebellion. Yeah. Noelle, do you have something to add to that?
He like didn't free the slaves who were in the border states because he was like afraid of losing support from the states.
Right. He did not free the slaves in the border states, which hadn't seceded, but they were, he felt they were crucial. We can't let more states secede. So he didn't want to upset them. And he'd already offered them, like, we'll do compensated emancipation. I'll pay the owners if you'll free your slaves. And they said, no, not interested. So, yeah, so this is okay. So that's the question that gave people trouble. The first two were pretty easy, but let's look at number 12. That one was a little bit troublesome. We'll see. I'll tell you which one was the most common wrong answer. Ideas in the excerpt would most likely have influenced which of the following? A, arguments supporting defining slavery on the grounds of states' rights. Do you think yay or nay on that one? Some people are saying no. That was the most common wrong answer. And again, it could have been that they saw it and they knew that the South argued for slavery because of states' rights and it sounded kind of right. And then they probably didn't read the other answers. Let's look at the other ones. B. So would the ideas of Frederick Douglass here have influenced B, claims that the U.S. should occupy all Mexican territory? That just doesn't seem related, does it? He's not talking about that. C, attempts to convince plantation owners to stop farming cash crops. Well, that would end slavery, huh? But yeah, it's not really talking about that. D, efforts at assisting enslaved people in escaping from the South. Yeah, that it could have influenced those people. Yeah, that's right. That's the correct answer. But yeah, the A was the most common wrong answer. Okay. Oh, so now we have an interesting one, and these ones were the first two were kind of tricky for people. It's an interesting excerpt. What are we looking at here? Primary or secondary? Primary, says Kaylee. Y'all agree? You always go down here first to look, so you know what you're reading. And what is this? The Virginia State Secession Convention? What would that be? What were they trying to decide? Anna?
Yeah. So I said I was like I first of all, can I read this real quick? I'm just wondering.
What you
Sorry.
did,
The-
you,
Yeah, I was just
your
gonna read
hand
this after I
was,
answer the question.
okay,
That's my hand it was initially.
okay.
So the Virginia State Secession Convention was basically each state that was going to leave the Union, they had a convention to decide like, okay, are we gonna stick around or we're gonna get the heck out of here?
Mm-hmm.
So basically, of course, like each state, like a state governor can just randomly say, okay, we're done, bye Union. They
Mm-hmm.
had to have a convention so that people could agree, like, okay, it's time for us to leave. So
Mm-hmm.
if people wouldn't have a right if they did separate from the Union, they weren't happy.
Right.
Sort of like a constitutional convention kind of deal.
Yeah. Yeah. It was kind of like that. Yeah. And every state in the South would have one of these. And notice that anyone notice anything about this date, March 4th, 1861? Does that ring any bells with anyone? Walter.
Yeah, so it was after the first wave of secession. South Carolina seceded in December of 1860, and a
Mhm.
bunch of others like Alabama, Mississippi, a lot of the deep South states.
Yeah.
But there were still there was four states, Virginia, Tennessee, Arkansas, and I'm blanking on the other one. That
North
didn't
Carolina. I don't
North
know.
Carolina, yeah,
Yeah.
that hadn't seceded yet, but then they formed these secession conventions in early 1861, and when Lincoln called for 75,000, recruits to march into the South, then they really felt like that was sort of an invasion of their territory, and so that kind
Mhm.
of spurred a bunch of them to
Mhm.
secede.
Yeah, it was like after Fort Sumter that flipped all those, southern states that were a little bit upper South, but still not border states, as it were. Yeah, and anyone recognize anything specifically about that date, March 4th, 1861? I mean, I had to look this up to confirm it, but I suspected. Derek, Darren, do you?
Okay, yeah, I can say something. I think I didn't maybe get the exact event you're referring to. I was just gonna say that it was maybe a month before the Civil War, or it was, I think,
Yes,
right
it
before
is a
the first
month
attack.
before the Civil War, right? And it
Yeah.
was like once the fighting started in South Carolina, then all those other states like Virginia would join in. So this is a month before that. So they're hesitating here. Madeline, do you have a thought?
If I'm remembering correctly, wasn't that the date that Lincoln became the president?
Yes, that was literally the day that Lincoln was inaugurated. Very good. Yeah. And I had to look that up to confirm. I was thinking, oh, it's right around the time. No, that was the day. While Lincoln is being inaugurated, Virginia, right there next to Washington, is holding their convention about secession. Okay. So let's see what this guy, Waitman Willie, is going to say. So we might want to have someone who can do a pretty good Southern accent here. As we have any volunteers for this one? Oh, we've got our Southerners. How about Kaylee? We'll give this one to Kaylee. Okay. And we want to see what's his attitude. Is he going to be pro-secession or against secession? Okay.
What fault has there been on the part of the general government of the United States? Why break up this union? Why will any gentleman be so kind as to particularize a single instance worthy of debate in which the federal government has been derelict, negligent in discharge of its duty? Or has it failed to accomplish the purposes of its organization? I am not here to defend the election of Abraham Lincoln. I believe that his election was virtually a fraud upon the people of the United States, nominated as he was by a sectional party and upon a sectional platform, with no representation in the body which nominated him from the South. But he was nominated and elected according to the forms of law. Let us look at the evils that must result from secession. The first, in my opinion, would be that our country would not only be divided into a Northern Confederacy and into a Southern Confederacy, but sooner or later it would be divided into several petty confederacies. We would have a Central Confederacy, a Confederacy of the States of Mississippi Valley, a Pacific Confederacy, a Western Confederacy, an Eastern Confederacy, a Northern, and a Southern Confederacy. It is easy, perhaps, to break down this government, but, sir, when we break it down, it will not be so easy a matter to build it up. Gentlemen crowd against tyranny of their own government, and yet denounce those opposed in secession because we hesitate to allow ourselves to be thrust into the embraces of such a military dictatorship.
Great. Excellent. Very good Southern accent. Well done. Um, so is he pro-secession or is he anti-secession? What's his, what do you think? Christopher, can you tell from what he wrote here? Does he want to secede? Thinks Virginia should secede or not? Does he think they shouldn't?
I think he wants to succeed.
Okay. Some people might have a different opinion here. Walter, what do you think?
He doesn't want to secede because he thinks that if they secede and set that precedent of breaking up the country, it's going to just break up further.
Hmm.
Which I think, he had a good point, but I don't know if it was, I think he was a little bit misguided because he said it's easy to break down the government. Well, I think the Confederacy would soon find it wasn't so easy to break it down. Like, they didn't realize that that Abraham Lincoln would have such a stern, they'd be like, okay, you guys are coming back and we're going to force you to. I
Yeah.
think a lot of them sort of had this hope, even if they kind of knew it wasn't fully a realistic hope, that
Hmm.
like the North would sort of not
I'll
really
go along.
not really do anything. They were kind of
Yeah.
just watch them leave and,
Yeah.
do it peacefully. And
It's
there was kind of a standoff in the first, while the Confederates states had seceded, but Fort Sumter
Mhm.
hadn't happened yet. There was kind of a standoff of like, okay, what are they going to do? Buchanan's doing nothing. What is Lincoln going to do once he gets to office?
Right.
You know, there was kind of that awkward standoff for a little while.
Mhm. There was. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah. But yeah, yeah, there was definitely people in the South who just thought, we'll make a really good argument. We'll put those declarations of secession out there and it'll be obvious. And they'll say, oh, okay. And there were some Northerners who felt that way. Well, let them go. We can't get along. Let them go. And, it's like back in the Revolutionary War with the Declaration of Independence. I'm sure there were some people in America who thought, well, we'll just write it in such a persuasive way that they'll all say, I never thought of it that way before. Of course, you should be free. You're free. Great. We'll let you go. And the majority knew that they were declaring war by writing the Declaration of Independence. They were already at war and they were now really declaring that we're going to keep on this track. Um, and yeah, I had little notes on my page from last year, and I was like, what did I mean by this? I wrote Humpty Dumpty next to this. And it's kind of like that's the argument the guy's saying. He's saying if we break it, be like Humpty Dumpty, the old Mother Goose rhyme, it'll be very hard to put it back together again. Very hard. And we'll regret it. And indeed, I don't know if any of you know about this, but during the Civil War, there were a lot of tensions between the Confederate states, the Southern states, that didn't like how the Confederacy was being run. And there was talk about seceding from the seceded Confederacy, that they didn't like it. And they had no rules against it at all, or no, they had been born by secession, so why not, every state could secede. Walter?
Yeah, some of the Confederate states thought that Jefferson Davis was becoming a dictator, which I
Yeah.
mean, he definitely had a lot more federal power than the Confederate government probably should have. Like the Confederate government is designed to be like very hands off, states have the power, but
Yeah.
Jefferson Davis kind of became this dictator, and they didn't like that. And
Mhm.
also that they also didn't like a lot of them didn't like the conscription laws that were being put in place,
Yeah.
and so that was some of the reasons that the Confederate states got kind of tense with each other.
Yeah. Ben Little from Alaska, who's never able to come to our live sessions. He has another commitment. But he's doing his National History Day project, doing a really good job on Southern discontent with those draft laws. Okay, Anna, let's hear from you. You have your real hand up now.
by both. Kind of redundant, but Anyway, so I would say this is kind of interesting because usually like, everyone thinks of the Southerners as people who are just angry with the North and everybody is in full unanimous consent. That's time to get out of the Union, etc.
Mhm.
And so I find interesting that this is a different point of view into the view, not view, how do I put it, like the whole scenario with secession.
Yeah. Saying like we're just going to keep breaking up. We're going to keep dividing. Yeah. So it's interesting, isn't it? He'll probably change his mind once, as I think it was Walter who said, once Lincoln calls for, 75,000 volunteers and, we're at war, that then Virginia quickly seceded. Okay, so the one that gave people the most problems here was question 15. So let's look at it. Which of the following conclusions can best be reached based on the sentiments expressed in the excerpt? So you have to know what the sentiments, what the point of view is. And for some people, that might be a little tricky to tell at first. Might need to read it a couple of times. Would it be A, sectional tensions erupted because most Southerners did not support Abraham Lincoln? Okay. Okay, a lot of people are putting up thumbs up on that. Yeah, that is the right answer. But two others got a lot of votes too. Quite a few people voted for sectional divisions were showing signs of diminishing. Again, sectional means, breaking apart. Like people don't use the word sectional nowadays, but they talk about the red states and the blue states and that sort of thing. And, we can't find any common ground, that sort of thing. But here they're saying sectional divisions were showing signs of diminishing. I have a little note that says, haha. Okay, let's look at the next one. But that one was a favorite one by a couple of people. So again, maybe they read it, I don't know, backwards or something. Okay, the next one, C, the Compromise of 1850 prevented the outbreak of long-term conflict. No, they hoped it would. They were settling the issue finally forever, but it wasn't to be. And this is 10 years later. Okay, and the last one, which got a lot of votes, the election of 1860 was a success for the idea that territories should vote whether or not to have slavery. Yeah, why would that be wrong? Why, let's hear from, let's see, Walter, you've got a thought on why that one's can't be right.
Yeah, so I guess from a very long-term perspective, you could say that like, okay, if it triggered the Civil War was what decided this. Okay, maybe you could say that, but if we're really looking at this in a, historical sense and looking at the
Yeah.
current time period, it really didn't determine the idea that whether territories should vote to have slavery or not. It only
Mhm.
escalated us into civil war, and so kind of put that on a pause for a while.
Yeah. And Lincoln was coming in and he had won um on a plank of no, the territory should not just be able to decide if they want slavery or not. He was very against that idea. He was a free soiler. Rainbow.
And wasn't Lincoln's like original thought of not like abolishing slavery, just not having it expand?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was one of his very key ideas. Like, look, I'm not going to touch slavery where it exists. I'm not one of those radical rabbit abolitionists like Garrison, but it shouldn't expand. We're holding the line there. Yeah. And again, I think I mentioned at one of our live meetings right before the holiday that there was a compromise. I think of the compromise of 1850, the Missouri Compromise. There was a compromise put in over that time when Lincoln had been elected, but he wasn't yet president, that they were trying to come up with a way that they could make another compromise, and they were gonna extend that Missouri Compromise line all the way to the Pacific, and every state below that could be a slave state, and they wouldn't allow it. It did not pass. Okay, well, let's go on. The next one people got pretty well. We just have time maybe for one more question. So we're going to skip the graph. People did well on the graph one, which is good. Some people don't like those type. Oh, this one is interesting. This one here, this document, what are we looking at? Here's the attribution. What are we looking at? What type of excerpt? A primary, right? It's Lincoln. He's going to be a primary source. And it's a letter. Now, what do you usually think about letters being? Do you write to 100 people at once in a letter, or it says it's to James Conkling, who I'm sure nobody's ever heard from. Yeah, it's usually to one person. He's writing a letter to James Conkling, whoever he is, and no one's ever heard of him, right? No one knows James Conkling from beans. Okay, I looked him up because I'm like that. James Conkling and Lincoln were good friends from back in Illinois. They were close friends. Their wives were best friends. Conkling and his wife got married, and 2 months later, Lincoln and his wife got married. Their children grew up together, okay? They were close, okay? And when I was first reading this, not remembering what I'd looked up last year about this, I was thinking, oh, it sounds like hey, be quiet, guys. Sounds like they had a falling out, because now it seems like James Conkling, the individual, doesn't agree with Lincoln's stance on the Emancipation Proclamation. Because, it says here in the attribution, it's a letter explaining why he issued the Emancipation Proclamation. And how about, let's see, can I have a volunteer to read this letter? And then I'm going to tell you who the real audience of this letter was, because it wasn't just James Conkling. Do we have a volunteer to Rainbow? Okay. You'll read it.
From there are.
Yes, there are those.
There are those who are dissatisfied with me. To such I would say, you desire peace, and you blame me that we do not have it. But how can we attain it? But to be plain, you are dissatisfied with me about the Negro. You dislike the Emancipation Proclamation, and perhaps would have retracted. You say it is unconstitutional. I think differently. I think the Constitution invests its commander-in-chief with the law of war in time of war. The most that can be said, if so much, is that slaves are property. Has there ever been, any question that by the law of war, property, both of enemies and friends, may be taken when needed? And is it not needed whenever taking it helps us or hurts the enemy? You say you will not fight to free Negroes. Some of them seem willing to fight for you. I issued the proclamation on purpose to aid you in saving the Union. Why should they do anything for us if we will do nothing for them? If they stake their lives for us, they must be prompted by the strongest motive, even the promise of freedom, and the promise being made must be kept.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, here's the backstory about this letter, which is not, you can still answer these questions, well, if you didn't know this, but I think it's interesting. So they're close old friends. And Conkling is still back in Illinois. He wrote a letter to Lincoln, inviting Lincoln to come to Illinois to talk to a conference of Union men, and I'm saying men because it would have been all men, Union men, Union supporters, but maybe ones who didn't like the Emancipation Proclamation. They were they wanted to win the war, but they had some problems, and he wanted Lincoln to come and speak at this little convention, this meeting, back in his home state. So what do you think Lincoln said? Do you think he'd have the time in the middle of the war to do that? 1863. He wrote back first saying, well, yeah, I'd love to come, but maybe I'll write you a letter. And he wrote back a few days later and said, yeah, I'm too busy. I'm not going to be able to come. So here's my letter. And he said, I want you to read this from me at this convention. So you read it aloud. And he gave him directions on how it should be read. He said, my main suggestion is read it very slowly. How many of you have ever done public speaking, a debate or something like that? And how many times has your coach or teacher or your helper said, speak more slowly, don't rush, all the time? And so that was Lincoln's
my life.
that was Lincoln's best advice here to this guy, to his good friend Conkling. Maybe he knew he read fast. He said, read it very slowly. So, and the idea was that he sent it to Conkling. It was to be read at this convention, this meeting, but not, and then to be published afterwards. They knew that, but not to be shared with anybody before the meeting. But then apparently Conkling sent a copy of the letter to a newspaper in Chicago, a newspaper someplace else in the Midwest, maybe in St. Louis, so that they could publish it right away after the speech. But somehow, like in today's world, there are often government leaks, somebody in the government or somebody in charge of something leaks something to the press. And somehow somebody along the line leaked it and it got to a New York newspaper. And it was published there, but only parts of the letter, not all of it. And Lincoln's reaction apparently was that he literally almost cried. He was so angry that this was published before this convention. But, nothing terrible seemed to come of that. But anyway, that's just the backstory of this. So when Lincoln says you here, he's not just talking to James Conkling. It's not like James Conkling disagreed with the Emancipation Proclamation. He's saying some of the people at this convention, this big meeting, would be disagreeing with it. Okay, so let's go on to question 20. This one gave people trouble. Okay. Lincoln's rhetoric. What's rhetoric? Who can give us a short thing of rhetoric here? Kaylee?
Is that like how he argues his point?
Yeah, how he argues, how he uses language. Right. Very good. Okay. So Lincoln's rhetoric in the excerpt would most likely have been interpreted as promoting which of the following arguments? Okay, so the way Lincoln argued promotes which of the following big ideas? A, allowing slavery to exist was still a political option. Is that yeah, that's no longer an option after the Emancipation Proclamation. B, maintaining the blockade of southern states was difficult. He's not talking about that. It was difficult to blockade the southern states, but that's not what Lincoln is talking about. We haven't seen anything yet about the Emancipation Proclamation. C, changing the purpose of the war would strengthen the Union cause. That's what, people often say. The Emancipation Proclamation still left a lot of people enslaved, but it changed the purpose of the war. And he says that it'll strengthen the Union cause. And D, achieving the Confederacy's unconditional surrender was the Union's main objective. That would be a tempting one, I would think, but it's not quite as good as that changing the purpose one. Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, let's look at this next one. That'll be our last one. Oh, wait. No, kids, we gotta go on to this next one because that's this marvelous cartoon. Hold up. Marvelous cartoon. Anyone recognize the name of the cartoonist? It's right there. Thomas Nash, the man who brought us, what we think of as Santa Claus, or the donkey for the Democrats, and for the Republicans, the elephant. Thomas Nast. And this is Uncle Sam's Thanksgiving Dinner, 1869, drawn in support of the 15th Amendment of the United States Constitution. And I hadn't realized until I'm going to show you a big version of this that I can make bigger. Hold up. Do you see what's on this centerpiece on the table? What does that bottom line say here? Can you read that? Kaylee, can you read that?
Universal suffrage.
Yeah, and suffrage means voting, so universal voting. So that's the 15th Amendment was the one that gave the vote to Black men. Anna?
And that's like besides black people, there are like a whole bunch of other races. Like
Yeah.
I see some things, the one who looks like, I think the one in like next to the baby looks like she's from China, and then like a
Yes.
whole bunch of other people. Like it's the most diverse Thanksgiving table image, especially from the era that I've never ever seen.
Right. It's an amazing image. And I will be showing you shortly another cartoon that was reacting to this. And it's pretty funny, but that'll be coming up. But yeah, what are some of the nationalities you see here? This man, probably Chinese, the long Q. Can you tell which country this woman is probably supposed to be from? That little fan and this headdress. Sana? What do you think she might be
Is it
from?
Mexico? Like Spain?
Yeah, it looks like Spain, Mexico, something like that, right? Oh, what about this guy here? This is Nast, typical way of showing this ethnic group. But he's being a little bit nicer here. Sana, what do you think this guy is supposed to be?
Irish or
Irish.
German?
This is Irish. I think this guy over here is probably supposed to be German. The German family. The Germans were always shown like that, kind of little bit pinched faces and spectacles on. And what's this guy here? Got some things coming out of his head. So now what do you think he's supposed to be representing?
Native American.
Native Americans, right? I'm not quite sure what this little family group is. This guy with his waxed mustache, I'm not sure, but something a little more exotic than an American. And then we've got an African American family here. This woman here, she's got these stars on her shoulders and this little sort of crowny thing. Can you guess who she's supposed to be? We've got Uncle Sam over here at the other end of the table, and she's opposite him. Anna?
Is that Colombia, the female representation of America?
Yeah, this would be Colombia here, right? And look here on the wall. Can you tell who these presidents are? Lincoln, Washington, and this is Grant. who was president at this time. And look at this on the fabric drape up here. Can you read what that says? Aubrey, can you read that?
It looks like it says 15th Amendment.
Yes. It hadn't quite been ratified yet or passed, but it was just about to be. It was a done deal. And Thomas Nast would have been supportive of that. So yeah, this is like this incredibly hopeful scene. And so that's what these questions are about. But we're not going to have time to go over the questions. But I interestingly found out that right just a few months before this cartoon was published, Frederick Douglass again had given a speech called Composite America, in which he was talking about, would we be better off having a whole bunch of, immigrants and, everyone coming together? He was talking about Chinese immigration in a positive way. So we're going to be a composite country. We're going to have lots of people. That's who we are. And he was saying it was going to be good. That speech became very famous, and Frederick Douglass gave it for like 5 years. But I'm sure Thomas Nast knew about that speech and had seen it, written up. And he was kind of showing that here. This was published right around Thanksgiving. Abigail and then James.
Oh, I just want to ask, like, what is written above the universal suffrage thing? Is it like self-government or?
That would be suffrage. It's kind of a weird term. It sounds like suffering, but it means voting rights.
Oh yeah,
So
I know that.
yeah.
Yeah, I was asking about the thing that's written above it.
Oh yeah, let's get back. What was let me go over to my other one where I can show it big.
It kind of looks like
Self-government, yeah.
to me.
Self-government.
I see.
Right. Self-government. So government of the people, by the people, for the people, that sort of idea. Like, we don't have a tyrant. We're self-governing. But yeah. So I just thought that was fun to have a Thomas Nast cartoon. That's often how they bring in cartoons. Okay. And yeah, we're not going to have time to go in any more, but thank you for all of you who could stay the whole time. Let me stop sharing my screen. Hold up. Stop sharing. Okay. Are you all back seeing each other? Okay. Good. Thank you very much for coming the whole time. If you stayed the whole time, you can take that extra 150 bonus points on your next log for doing so. And glad you could be here. It's good to see you all. I've missed you in the last, 2 weeks here. And see you again next week. So we won't have our week off because our week off was last week. So that's just the way it is. So we'll be the next, 3 weeks we'll be here. Okay. Any other closing comments? Hope you all had a good vacation. Anna?
What are my points counted since I was late? I was kind of curious.
What's that?
Like, do I get full points since I was late or?
You do, because you do, yes, you do. You do.
Okay,
That's
thank you.
just
I was kind
fine.
of concerned because, like, I understood because, like, most classes they take off points when the students are late.
You made it here. You count. Okay. Did anyone else have a final closing remark because they want to get that extra, I contributed, I said something? Okay. Well, Jamie has something to say. Jamie. Oh, I think you're muted, Jamie. Can you unmute?
Sorry, I was just like I don't know why, but it was about the cartoon.
Hmm.
It's fine if you don't want to go back to it. It's not really
No,
it. Like,
that's okay.
okay. But
Do you want me to share that again?
yeah, because I
Sure.
think I would have to, it's just something I wanted to point out.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay. You can all see the cartoon again? Let me, let me get it there.
Yeah. In the foreground
Mm-hmm.
of the cartoon, the part of the scene that's closest to the
Mm-hmm.
viewer,
Mm-hmm.
I just thought it was interesting that those three people, the Black American man and Miss Columbia, and then the Chinaman,
Mm-hmm.
I thought was interesting to me that they're all sitting together and being friendly with each
Mm-hmm.
other because I think it's fair to say that at this time for America, those were the three races that were the most historically significant.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was just something I wanted to point out. It seems like it's being very hopeful for just cooperation and peace.
Yes. Very good point. Very good point. Yeah, NAST was very helpful. And you'll see in our PSDA coming up, I think it's for this week. It's on the Chinese Exclusion Act. And what I want you to do is choose one of Thomas Nast's many, many, many cartoons about that subject. I think you'll find it really interesting. Um, and he was very he was positive about the Chinese, and he thought they they could be, worked into our country, and this wasn't going to be a problem, and they should be given their rights and invited to the table, as it were. He'd already, he'd drawn this cartoon. So it's quite interesting. Um, yeah. And he was also supportive of Black Americans' rights. So yeah, good point. Thank you, Jamie. That's a very good point. Christopher, you have something else to share?
Oh no, I have nothing to share. I just have a question for the
Okay.
mid-year review questions we were
Oh,
supposed to
okay.
do.
Hmm.
So I see that we have two of them. So I'm guessing you said that we have to
They're
first
both
run
the
through like
same. They're the same. It's
oh,
just
they're the same.
they're the same. So first you go through it solo, do the number one, and then you go back with a friend from the class. Maybe you and Abigail could try to meet
Yeah,
up
yeah.
because online because you'd be in the same time zone. Um, whatever you want to do, but that might be easier for you. Um, but yeah, then you go through it again with a friend from the class um, as soon as you can, and then you talk about it, talk about the questions, and you have to agree before you can put down your answer. Okay?
Oh, I see. Okay, I understand. Okay, I
Okay.
thought there
And
were two separate ones, and I was like,
no,
"What? This it only says mid-review." Okay, never mind. I got it.
no, yeah.
Thank you.
So it's there's just I have them labeled two different ways because that was the way I could do it in AP Classroom. Um, and I'll see your scores. What I'm looking for, I'm hoping for is, your first score may be good, but maybe here, and then your second score will probably be way up. People always show like when you're talking with somebody that you think a little more clearly, you don't rush. Um, so that's the idea there. Good. I'm glad you asked about that. Thank you. Okay, any other closing remarks? Rainbow.
On AP Classroom, it's the first mid year review and the
Yeah.
second mid year review, right? Okay.
You do the first mid-year review by yourself. Click on that one. And the second one is just the same questions. I just relabeled it. And then you do that with meeting with someone else from the class. So you need to find a study buddy from the class, maybe someone from your team or anyone. And you can have a group of three people. I wouldn't say more than three. It's just too hard. Someone will sit there and be real quiet. So it's better to have two or three. But Yeah. So it'll be fun. And I'll be sharing then next week, how people did, again, I'm not going to embarrass anybody by saying, and so only got 20 right. But I'll be sharing the names of the top kids who did really well. And then I'll be showing, how you went up the week after. So I know it can be tricky to set up a time to meet with somebody. So, if you can try to get the study buddy one done by the end of next week, we'll be fine. Anna?
We do the individual one before we do the study buddy one, or is it okay, or does the order not matter?
Can you do what?
Like I do the study buddy one before I do the individual, or is it okay if I do the study buddy and then the
You do
individual?
first individually to see how you do by yourself, and then you do it with a study buddy. Okay. We could do it the other way, but that's the way we've always done it. So try that
Yeah.
out. And yeah. Okay. So yeah, we'll look forward to seeing those. I'm not, it's okay if you don't get it done tomorrow. But try to get it done this week. Okay. Okay. Let's wave goodbye to everybody here. Thank you all for coming. Back on track. Okay. Okay. Looking forward to the
Yes,
second
yeah.
semester. Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for your time.